Hi everybody, welcome back to the Skookum Report. Tonight we'll be wrapping up our interview with Dave, the gentleman who had a confrontation with a Bigfoot in the mountains of California while he was in the military doing some training. This is part 2 with Dave, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Here you go.
I can only say that I believe it was a lot of it was my training overrode my conscious mind and said, this is how we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. This is how you're going to move, and you're going to do this. You're going to keep going forward.
Now, at any point, did you feel like, you know how people say their life flashes before their eyes or anything like that?
Not in so many words. I wouldn't say I saw my life flash before my eyes. I kind of came, the closest I can think of that would come close to that was I kind of came to a realization, you know, when I was thinking which way am I going to go? Where am I going to, you know, all right, now I've realized I have to get out of here. There's no two ways about it. I have to move. Which way do I go? Do I go downhill? Do I go to the left? Do I go to the right? Do I run back to the Bivy site? Well, I'm not an idiot. I'm not leading this thing back to my guys. Yeah. Now, you know, you can argue both. I mean, once you have the luxury of calm and peacefulness, and you're sitting there collecting your thoughts, and the danger, the imminent threat is all gone, you can double check yourself. You can double, you know, second guess yourself all you want. Well, why not lead them back to a group, a large group, strength in numbers type thing? But in my opinion, if all I have is blanks, and I know that all of my team has is blanks, we have nothing. With the size of this thing, I don't care if it was 12, 13, or 30 guys. I'm being completely honest with you. 30 well-trained Marines, this thing would have walked through us like nothing. You know, it was literally that you were able to think that fast, and then you thought of everyone else's safety, and that's pretty commendable, man. Well, and especially with no time to think. I think, like you said, that was your training kicked in. Well, it had to be, because with a conscious thought and trying to make decisions consciously, you're not going to have that luxury of that time. It's not going to come that quick, and that's why we train the way we do. Is because when we get into the shit, okay, if we're called, our number's called, and we have to be deployed, everybody sits there and thinks, oh, well, you know, the military, they just want mindless robots that go out there and kill. No, they don't. They want you to be able to think. But at the same time, conscious thinking does take extra time. And so we train so that things become second nature and almost autonomous. And that takes less time when you're running on instinct and subconscious thinking. When you're going by your training, you don't have to take time to think and put everything together. It's already there, and it's almost effortless and thoughtless. It's just one after the other, things fall into place. And so I agree. There was a lot of time that wasn't used up by thinking, but I mean, I can't sit there and take credit for it, because, like I said, I was scared shitless. I mean, literally, I was scared. Literally, quite literally. And I mean, you know, nothing that I did was a forethought. Everything was coming at me just 100 miles a minute, and everything. There was almost no controlling the thoughts. There was almost no controlling the process. It was just, okay, step A, step B, X, Y, Z, what if then. And it's almost like if you've ever gone into any of the old school basic computer programming, if then is an actual command subroutine. If X equals Y, then run line XYZ. And it's, you know, a very basic generalization of it, but that's actually a command. If then is actually a command in DOS programming. Gotcha. So you know, and like as you know, a computer can calculate things 100 to 1,000 times faster than the human brain can consciously. But subconsciously, the human brain picks up a lot, and I think that's why people go into this mode where they black out and they don't remember, because the confusion created by seeing something that's not supposed to exist overloads your brain. And, you know, like you said, it does not compute error, and you start smoke coming out of the ears and shit. So
now, at any point, I'm curious to, when he just let loose and roared, and you were probably only like 40 feet away or so.
No, this would have been this when he let loose with that roar. I was half the original distance from me to the tree lines. I had closed the distance by about half, and that's why I said this noise hit me. It literally hit me physically and caused me to stumble back.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you are you familiar with infrasound?
Yes, I am.
Now, did you, in hindsight, did you deal with any of that? Do you think he blasted you? Or?
Very well could have been. I mean, the symptoms and the onset of symptoms afterwards do correspond. Now we've actually trained. I've actually I don't know about the pleasure or the displeasure, but I've had the opportunity to train what they call DEW weapons, DEW, and it's called directed energy weapons. They're not commonly used. They are still very theoretical and in the what they call the trial phase. But supposedly the premise behind these weapons is they were there and they were designed for non-lethal crowd control.
Okay.
And what it does is it uses and I'm not an expert on it, but it basically uses an energy frequency or a sound frequency that's not audible, or it even may be audible. But when it hits a human body, it causes a physiological response that can cause cramps, extreme nausea, headaches, and it's basically, for all intents and purposes, what it does is it negates the target's will to fight.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if I had to say, if I had to put it into a yes or no column, I would have to say yes. Right. It does seem that it may have been a type of infrasound. Now, I didn't notice it immediately. Again, this could have been because of just the psychological state that I was in from what I was seeing and experiencing. You know, once you sit down, you know, if you've ever been through anything traumatic, life-altering or life-threatening, you know that you get the adrenaline going, and you don't really feel it until everything calms down, and then you get the nauseousness and the upset stomach.
Yeah. And you're right. You're right.
You know,
that.
you got to come down from that adrenaline dump.
Yeah.
So afterwards, yeah, there were symptoms that can be correlated with infrasound or DEW type of directed energy weapon, but I didn't.
You were
I can't
close
say
to that,
brother. I was. And I literally was. Like I said, this thing it was close enough, but this thing was also big enough that you know, one maybe a step and a half for it to reach out an arm, and I'm done. You know, I'm a rag doll. So it was terrifying. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, you guys are supposed to be big, tough guys." I don't give a shit how big and tough you are.
Oh man,
you're not.
10
when you're
feet tall, 4 feet wide. I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around that. That's just immense.
Well, I mean, that makes two of us, and this happened to me 25 years ago. So. And I still, you know, it doesn't happen. It happens a lot less frequent, but I still have nightmares about this. Even right now, I feel the shaking, the vibrations and the shaking in my arms, inside my body, not just my muscles, but inside your body. I can feel the adrenaline releasing, and it gets, you know, it still gets to you after 25 years. I mean, like I said, you're trying to process something that can't be processed, something that you have been conditioned your entire life. And let's see, I was 21. I had just turned 21 when this happened. So for 21 years, I was told, now my brain was conditioned to believe this shit's all fake. It's all Hollywood. Yeah. It's not real.
Nonsense. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I don't care who says what. And this is why it took me a long time, but I finally came out in the open, started talking to people about it openly and publicly just, 3.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we're talking for 22 years. I kept it inside because everybody was going to, even Tom. Now, if you go back, if you remember, we stepped away to go use the restroom, and he passed by me. Now, we were supposed to stay together, and something had scared him to the point where he ignored all of our operating procedures. Yeah. Everything that we had just agreed upon, he ignored, threw out the window, and he's like, F this, I'm out.
Yeah.
So, and I got a chance to talk to him later on. I was going through SEP training, or SEP classes, which is your separation classes. Basically, they try to acclimate back into civilian life, which is a freaking joke. But anyways, I saw him. I was sitting in the E Club, and I was at the end of my classes for the day, and I saw him. I was having a beer. We sat down and talked, and I asked him. I says, "Look," I says, "let me ask you a question. 95 Bridgeport, and you could see his body tense up." I said, "Tom, what did you see?" And at first he wouldn't say anything, and then he just kind of, he kind of looking down into his beer, and he looked up, and he says, "You know what I saw, Dave. You know what I saw." And he looked at me, and he reached into his pocket. And I remember it clear as day. A lot of people would just be like, "Well, why?" And he reached into his pocket. He threw a $10 bill on the table. He looked at me, and he gave me one of those looks like, "I'll see you around." And he walked out. He said, "It's good. It's been good seeing you." I knew at that point because I had trained with Tom for a good couple of years. We knew each other. And you develop a bond with these guys that you train with after training and being so intimate, but not sexually intimate, but just being so close. You develop a bond with these people that you train with, and you learn, who, this one acts this way, this one's going to act that. You'll know how they're going to react. I knew exactly what he was saying when he threw the $10 bill on the table. He's basically saying goodbye. Now, if a good friend, somebody that you've been through thick and thin with like that, is willing to just say goodbye over something like that, get up and end the conversation and walk away, yeah, there's underlying issues there. And apparently he had tried to talk to somebody. I don't know whether it was at home on leave. He tried to talk to his family, but he had tried to talk about it and was basically, the story I got is he was basically told shut up, or he was going in for a psych eval and possibly be released on a Section 8 discharge, which is a psychological discharge. So I don't know. I wasn't there for all of that. I don't know, but this was what got back to me through people that we knew, in common friendship. But it's crazy.
That is terrible. It's bad enough you have to go through the experience, but but then to have to deal with the way people treat you afterwards, and it's just like salt in the wound,
It is, but there's more to it than that. Now it's my belief that it's my knowledge, and it's common belief through other people that the government actually knows.
Yeah.
They know what's going on. They know these things exist. I won't sit there and say they know exactly what they are. I'm not going to I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole and say there's this huge conspiracy that they were genetically engineered.
Right.
I'm not going to go into all that.
I'm right there.
But I know for a fact.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that there are people out there in the government, and there are other members of the military that are still active duty out there doing the job and training that know they exist. For instance, once we got back to the company area, when we ended that patrol, I heard a couple of guys sitting around. They were sitting around talking, and I heard them talking about they thought they heard a bear. Well, nobody else heard anything. Nobody in my squad, none of my guys, none of Tom's guys and his team, nobody would admit to hearing shit.
Mm-hmm.
Not that. Now, every one of them is awake when I get back to the company area. Okay, or when I get back to the bivouac site, every one of them is awake. Tom's sitting there; he's got a little fire going, heating up some hot water for some coffee. Everybody's awake, so you're not going to tell me that out of 14 people, me and 13 other guys, I'm the only one that heard it. No, you're not going to tell me that.
I was going to ask you about that, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did it end up? Did it just turn and walk back into the woods, and then you went back to the site, and then did everyone else? They had to hear that.
Well, that's what I thought, and it ended very matter of factly.
Mm-hmm.
It postured and roared, and it threw up that little, rolling its shoulders and arms forward, that little Hulk pose, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, when I raised my weapon is when it did that. So it was, I'm assuming, was in a direct answer to what it appeared as a threat.
Yeah.
Well, when it did that, I lowered my weapon. I didn't drop it, but I lowered my weapon, and it was no longer pointed at it. And it just stood there, and you could hear the lay breathing. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, okay. Well, I lowered the weapon. It's not screaming anymore. Let me back away. So I took a couple steps.
Yeah.
And it's just standing there, and it's watching me. And I took a couple more steps. And I finally got to a point where I felt comfortable enough that for a brief second I could turn away from it. And so I angled my body 45 degrees between it on one shoulder and the bivouac site off my other shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned to look at the bivy site just to make sure I was going and heading where I needed to head to. And when I turned back to look at it, it was gone.
Sure.
So I hauled ass. And like I said, when we got back to the company area, when we were all done with the patrol, we're back in the company area. I had a meeting to go to with my staff sergeant and the platoon commander. And I'm walking through the area, and like I said, I heard these guys talking about, well, so and so said they heard a bear out on their patrol.
Mm-hmm.
There were only two other patrols in our general vicinity. And that was the three of us were out there for that night on that day. Everybody else was back in the command area. So I'm standing there, and the one guy just looks up at me, and I'm listening, and I realize I'd actually stopped, and I'm staring at him. He just looks up, and he's like, "What?" So I shrugged it off, and I'm sorry, and I went about, and I tried to talk to Tom about it when I got done with the meeting. And we were walking back to our squad area where our squad was, and I was trying to talk to him. And one of the instructors came up to me, and I guess they had heard about the story. They had heard what had happened. And this is how I knew that Tom had tried to talk to somebody, and they started threatening them with a Section 8. This is why I believe that. This is why I believe that. This is why I believe that there's truth to it, because one of the instructors came up to me, and he just kind of put a hand on my shoulder. And he just looked at me and gave me like a couple quick pats. He says, "You did all right. You did the right thing." And he walked away. What the fuck? How do you? And Tom just looked at me. He dropped his head, shook his head. He looking at the ground, and he wouldn't even look up at anybody. He just kept walking. So I know that somebody out there knows what's going on. And in fact, through my investigations, I've talked to a lady that has done. Actually, she has a book, a manuscript from a lady that's done investigations for years. And she's taken reports from a lot of people. They live on the West Coast out in California. She's taken reports from a lot of vets that have come forward. And it's not just people out there training. It's the guys that work on that base out at Bridgeport, that they know these things are out there. They've seen them.
And that was the end of our interview with Dave. If anybody has a question for Dave, put it in an email, shoot it out to me at skookumreport@gmail.com, or you can put your question in the comment section below, and I'll make sure he gets those. And I can either put him in touch with you guys or put you guys in touch with him, one or the other. We'll figure something out. If you or anybody you know has had a Bigfoot encounter or a sighting and you'd like to have it on the channel, just put it in an email and send it to me at skookumreport@gmail.com. That's skookumreport@gmail.com. And I'll be sure to get it up on the channel for you, no problem at all. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment and say hi. I enjoy chatting with you guys. So until next time on the Skookum Report, I appreciate y'all and God bless. Take care. Bye.